What is up to all of my Baggins dragons out there? Welcome to another podcast. This is episode 3 of the Diary of a Silver Pourer. So, this is where I talk about my silver pouring experience. So far, I've talked about the equipment that I've used in the first 2 episodes. So, we've gone over all of that. If you are a new silver pourer, I think this would be a great tool for you to kind of hear someone talk about their experience and everything. And also, this will be good for me to look back on and kind of see where I've come from in the future when I'm a master silver pourer, hopefully. We'll see. So, anyway, I have talked about the equipment needed for pouring. There's a few things that I left out. I want to cover that. And then I want to talk about my experience as a new silver pourer. So I want to talk about my first pour and kind of how I feel about it right now. So let's get right into that. First thing I want to talk about is safety equipment, though, because safety equipment is extremely important. It's absolutely vital and necessary for silver pouring. You need to make sure you're safe and have a safe working environment. So the first thing is personal protective equipment, or PPE. You're going to need some stuff for pouring to make sure you're safe. I'm going to say glasses are the number one thing that you need. So they could be safety glasses, clear, or they could be tinted. It doesn't really matter, whatever you're more comfortable with. And if you have glasses that you wear normally, you could wear those as well. Those are fine. But just know you could get special safety glasses, which will cover more part around your eye, just in case any silver comes flying in there. So I gave an example of pouring silver into a cold mold. Sometimes it can pop out. I've seen that happen to other people. One thing that has happened to me personally was I dropped a piece of silver back into the crucible to be remelted. I didn't like the way the bar looked, and there was still some silver in the bottom, and it actually splashed out, and the molten silver came flying out of the top of the crucible, and it landed on my bench, and it didn't hit me, thankfully, but I was wearing my safety glasses, so if it did go near my eye, that would have protected me. So your eyes, it obviously goes without saying, are extremely important. You need those, and you don't want to damage them. So glasses are the number one thing you're going to need, and you can get those for as low as $1, $2 at the some of the big box stores. One near my house sells them for $1. So definitely pick those up, and then you're going to need gloves, heavy welding gloves as well. You don't want to get any molten silver on your hands. You don't want to burn yourself. If you do burn your skin, it loses its elasticity. So especially on your hands, you need your skin to be bendy. So you don't want to get any burns. The heavy welding gloves will help protect you from that. The ones I picked up were around $10. They're pretty bulky. They're made out of leather, and they're for welding, but they work great for silver pouring. I didn't really expect them to be as bulky as they were. I got a size large, which my hands are large, for all of their gloves. And I was like, wow, these are super loose. But that's actually the way they're supposed to be, a little bit bulky. You can get ones that are tighter, I think, for maybe TIG welding or something along those lines. But I just went with the big leather ones. They were the cheapest ones I had anyway. So those are working out pretty good for me so far. Okay, so you got your gloves, you got your glasses. If you have long hair, you might need to tie it back, or obviously make sure you're not wearing flip-flops and stuff like that. Wear good working clothes. I'd recommend cotton because it doesn't melt. If you had some sort of polyester blend and you got silver on it, it could actually melt into your skin, which isn't good. So cotton just burns. It's natural fiber. Okay, you got all your personal protective equipment. For other safety stuff, make sure that you've got some sort of stone working surface. It could be granite. I mean, you could just go on like your granite countertops or, quartz, marble, whatever, if you wanted to. Actually, you could go to a place that makes them and see if they have any scraps or leftovers and try and get a big piece of granite for free. That'd actually be a really good idea. But what I did was I just went down to the big box store and I got some stone pavers, which work well. It could be stone, brick, anything along those lines, as long as it's rock of some sort. Those are really able to absorb heat well, so you can literally just pour the silver onto it if you wanted to, and it's not going to burn down your house. If you were working on a wooden working surface, That's pretty sketchy. You really shouldn't be doing that. You need to be on either metal like cast iron or steel or stone, I would recommend. Okay, you got your good stone working surface, you got your protective equipment. Make sure you have a fire extinguisher on hand, especially if you have an electric furnace. You need to make sure you have a dry chem fire extinguisher. It should say ABC on the side of it somewhere. You don't want to use water on electricity because they don't really mix. It won't really stop the fire, and yeah, so make sure you've got a good fire extinguisher. I keep mine nearby, and you should be good to go. So, all right, you got all of your protective equipment. You're ready to pour. Now let's talk about the silver pouring. So, my first time I ever booted up the furnace, I was a little scared. I turned it on. I let it get up to 500 degrees Celsius. And I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. And it kind of the crucible turned sort of a dark maroon color. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And then I noticed that I actually had some stickers on it and some packaging still kind of attached to the outside of the furnace. So I thought, oh no, I better shut it down, pull all that stuff off before it gets too hot. I don't want to burn my house down, obviously. So I shut her down. I only let it get up to 500 that time. And then someone suggested before I do my first ever pour that I should let it heat up all of the way and kind of burn off some of the dust that's in the crucible. So I thought that was a good idea. I removed the stickers and everything, and then I turned it on maybe a day or two later and let it get all the way up to 1,094 degrees Celsius, which is about 2,000 Fahrenheit, and that's the optimal pouring temperature. And I noticed that the crucible turned red hot, orange almost, and the bottom of it was white. It was crazy. I'd never really seen anything like that before. Other than being around maybe an oven or something like that, never really been around anything super hot. Definitely nothing like this. So it was a new experience, and you can feel the heat, definitely. I mean, as long as you're 2 feet away, you're fine. But once you get closer than that, you can for sure feel the heat. I mean, it's very hot. So you want to be careful and not burn yourself, obviously. But I let it go for maybe 5 minutes. I probably should have let it go a lot longer to kind of burn the dust off. Now that I look back, maybe I should have let it go for an hour or something. But anyway, so I let it go for about 5 minutes, shut it down, and the whole process took about 45 minutes to heat up, which was longer than I expected. I didn't really know what to expect, but it just kind of slowly heats up. And then once it gets near the top temperature that you have it set at, it'll actually turn off the heating element and then turn it back on to kind of slowly bring it up the last couple degrees. It doesn't want to just, keep it on and get all the way up and then go way over the temp. I've actually never seen it go over the temperature I have it set to, which is kind of cool. But it kind of slows down, and it will maybe drop down a degree or two and go back up 1 or 2 and then kind of slowly make its way up to the temperature you have it set at. But eventually it always has so far. So yeah, I shut it down, and then I kind of got ready for my first pour. My first pour that I did was on a live stream, and it was the Pour to Cord bar, which is a traveling bar. It's currently on its way to the first recipient. Probably by the time this uploads, it will already have made it to them and be on the way to the next one, and maybe even beyond that. So yeah, but it's a community bar, and I wanted to keep the community involved as much as I possibly could, so I did it on a live stream, and I was absolutely terrified. Doing my first pour on a live stream, what was I thinking? Looking back on it, I don't know. I maybe would have done it differently, so I could have reported if I messed it up or whatever. But especially because when you get to the last pour, it's a lot harder than if you're doing your first pour. And let me talk about that for a second. So let's say you wanted to pour a 2-ounce bar like I did, and you had 20 ounces of silver in your crucible, it's much easier to pour the first one than once you get down to just 2 ounces and pour the last bar. It just, I don't know, for some reason, I think it's maybe some of the properties of the silver. It kind of holds onto itself. It's almost like a mixture between syrup and water, when you pour it out, it kind of holds on to it if there's some still in the crucible, and it kind of comes out a little bit slower. But if there's nothing in there to hold on to the silver, it just flies out. I don't know why. It comes out way faster. So I didn't know this, of course. So I was doing my first pour. I put just the 2 ounces of silver in there. That was the whole plan, the whole idea. I was melting the 2 pieces of silver together and making a bar out of it. And also I was kind of thinking, this will be easy because I can just stamp it 2 ounces. I'm melting down 2 ounces of silver. I'm pouring it into 1 bar. It's going to end up being 2 ounces, which it did. But, I could, some of it could have stuck in there and not came out, or, there could have been other issues, which I wasn't really thinking of. And so, after that bar, I was contemplating, should I just melt 2 ounces at a time, and then every bar will be exactly 2 ounces? And no, that's a terrible idea. It would take way too long, and the pours would not look as good because, like I said, it's easier to pour if there's a ton of silver in there, which I didn't know, of course. It was my first pour ever. So I got it all heated up, and I poured it out, and of course, it came out really fast. Basically, what I try to do is just hold the crucible completely horizontal with the ground, just totally flat, and let the silver kind of slowly make its way out, and then just tip it a couple degrees. And as soon as I tipped it a few degrees up, it just flew out of there into the mold. And thankfully, none of it actually came out of the mold. It all ended up in there. But one of the corners in the back sort of came up the mold. It looked like I called it a thumbs up in the video. But so I did my first pour. Everything seemed to go pretty well. There was a bunch of graphite that got stuck on the top of the bar, which I didn't expect that. I'd never seen that from anyone else's pours. It hasn't really happened to me since that first bar. I think it was just a bunch of dust in the crucible that didn't get burned out fully. And that's kind of why it did that. So yeah, ever since that first pour, all the bars have been looking great. But, so I had all the graphite on there, and I had that little thumbs up in the corner. I dumped the bar out, and what you can use is just use your tongs that you pick up your crucible with. You can use those to hold the mold. You don't want to use your gloves or anything. The mold will actually get really hot. The mold can get red hot from the silver being poured into it. And so just use your tongs, or you could get a special wrench or something if you want. So flip over the mold, and the bar will just fall right out. Make sure you're dropping it onto stone, obviously, or stainless steel or something, but don't drop it on the wood because it'll set fire to it. I actually have accidentally set my tongs down after handling the crucible on wood, and it made a little mark. It actually burned the wood a little bit, so be careful not to do that. Always set down the tongs on stone as well. But anyway, so after you dump it out, then you can put the mold back, and then you can pick up the bar with the tongs as well, or you could get pliers or a wrench or something. It doesn't matter. And you want to dunk it in water, and you will hear it cool off. It cools off very fast in a matter of seconds, and then you can handle it. You can touch it right away, put it in your hand. It's amazing. It gets really cold, actually. So yeah, I showed off the bar and everything, and then I wanted to get it cleaned up before I stamped it. And so after the live stream was over, actually what I did was I just threw it in the tumbler. I had no idea what to expect, and I tumbled it for about 12 hours, and then I checked on it. And there still was a lot of graphite on the top, and that little thumbs up in the corner was still there, and it was still kind of sharp. So what I ended up doing was I weighed it, and I made sure it still was weighing a little bit heavy, which it was. And I used my Dremel, which is a small tool. It's a handheld tool. It kind of looks like I don't know, maybe a really fat screwdriver or something, but it's basically just a drill. You can put any sort of attachment you want onto the front of it, and it can get going really fast. And so I put on a little sanding attachment I had. It's just a little 100 grit sandpaper, kind of in a little barrel shape. And I use that to just ever so slightly round over that part where that little thumbs up was, which did take off a little bit of silver. It did actually lower it by maybe 0.01 of an ounce or something, less than a gram. But that was able to get the bar looking more actually the shape of a bar. So I just helped it out a little bit, and then I threw it back in the tumbler. And I actually ended up tumbling that first one for about 30 hours to get it tumbled all the way. So to get all the graphite cleaned off of the top of it, which it really did take that long. It seemed to go forever, but finally I got it all cleaned up and polished and looking great. And then I was able to stamp it, which I stamped it, and the stamping actually turned out very well. I love the way the stamping turned out on the Portacord bar. It's actually better than some of my Baggins bars that I've done. But so yeah, that was my first pour. I didn't really know what to expect, but that's kind of how it went. And if you're new and getting into it, that's sort of what you can expect for your first pour. It might go a little bit different, especially if you have a different setup than me, if you get a different furnace, or if you're just using torches and a crucible. One thing I will mention is if you are just using torches and a crucible, one of those sort of round cup looking type things, you're going to need to get some borax to put in there, so that the silver won't stick to the crucible. Also, borax will help clean the silver. So I have purchased some of that. I used it on my first pour, and I haven't ever used it since. I didn't need to. But basically, it's just detergent booster. A lot of people have it in their house already, or you can just go get it from Walmart or something. It's really cheap, like $5. And so that's something, a piece of equipment you might need as well. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode. This is episode 3 of Diary of a Silver Pourer. So I've now covered all the equipment that I have, all the equipment that you need, and I've talked about my first pour. And so, we'll just keep going with the series, and I'll talk about more pours and different molds and cool, fun stuff that I'm trying, and all that good stuff in future episodes. But thank you so much for listening. I sincerely appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Silver Baggins out.